This is one of those stories, and you're like, wait a minute, preacher, you've talked about it's Easter. It's still the season of Easter. We've got signs all around us that it's Easter. The front of the bulletin says it's Easter, and now we're backed up into John 10. That's before Easter. What are you talking about? Well, this is a pre-Easter story, but part of what we try to do in the season of Easter is really try to analyze who and what Christ does for us, especially the resurrected Christ. And so today's story, it actually goes back, and it's part of what's known sometimes by the scholars as the Good Shepherd narrative in John 10. And Jesus really identifies who he is. I am the Good Shepherd is part of that. We see Jesus portrayed oftentimes in Good Shepherd imagery. There's the beautiful stained glass window just down the hallway to take a look out on your way out if you headed down this hallway. There are other places in which Jesus is trying to tell you who he is, and here we are in the middle of some of it. And today he's at the temple, and the Jewish people that have gathered around him want to know plainly who he is. It's kind of interesting that we think about Christ as being the light of the world. And we do burn the Paschal candle during the season of Easter as a reminder of Christ being alive and resurrected, the light of the world, shining brightly, alive with us. And this story from John 10 is a story that's connected to Hanukkah. It's a story about light in the world. Imagine that. It takes place at the temple that you all know from your biblical scholarship or your working information, that the temple was designed by David and it was built by Solomon. And then there were periods of great distress and tribulation, most connected to the Syrians. You remember this, right? I know you do. So the Syrians captured the temple. They actually held a sacrifice to Zeus on part of the altar. And so part of the time, once this rebel, this Judas Maccabee, got rid of them during this season in which there was light that continued, oil in the lamp that continued to burn during the 8 days of the revolt. And so it's connected to that and all this light and all this good stuff going on. That's where Jesus is. In that temple, Jesus, the light of the world, is there, showing once again to the world around the light that he is. But you see, they've gathered around him, the religious leaders of the day, they've gathered around him and they said, if you'll just tell us plainly who you are. I love the old adage sometimes, and it seems fitting some days more than others, that you can lead a horse to water, but you... What do you want me to do? Draw you one of my classic ones that a minister's wife used to use. What part of no don't you understand, the N or the O? Those things that we really set ourselves up against brick walls in our lives. What else do we need? I'm looking at the hairdryer with the warning label. Don't use it near a tub, sink, water. There's a reason they had to put that warning label on there. It's like, and now cars, remember your seatbelt. Remember to look in the back seat. It's like, how in the world do we keep making it in the world? You think about our human ancestors, like somehow they evolved for millions of years without all that. And yet sometimes we fall right into that. We just don't understand what's going on. Well, I want you to tell me plainly. I remember my mom and my dad, especially this day, they'd say, you need to go clean your room. What was my question? Why? You need to get your homework done before supper. Why? I want to know. I want to know why I have to do everything. And so I don't have that many hard feelings toward the Jewish people at the time, the religious leaders who want to know why or who Jesus is. Tell me plainly. But I also can empathize with Jesus looking at him and say, I've already showed you. I've already told you. I've already drawn a picture for you. I've already done miracles for you. I've fed 5,000 people. I've healed people who couldn't walk. I've done everything I need to do on my end for you to believe, and yet you still don't. I can imagine how frustrated he must be in life. Anybody else? How in the world, what would it take to convince them? But Jesus goes on, and this is both a part of the passage that I love and I find comfort in, and it also troubles my spirit just a little bit. And Jesus said, the sheep of my pasture know my name. They know my voice. They follow me. I love that. As one who counts myself in on part of the sheep, I love that I can hear Jesus' voice and Jesus' calling. But he tells them that they're not of his flock. And I'm not sure what to do with that. Because even earlier, just in the same chapter of John 10, it does say that there are other sheep and other flocks. I have other sheep and other flocks. And so I always thought that as kind of an opening to what God might do across the world and across peoples. You know, this welcoming spirit that reflects more closely what I understand who Christ is and how Christ loves and how Christ beckons us to follow and to chase after and to understand and to experience that grace and mercy. That's the goodness I know about God. I trust in God, hope for, long for, every day. But these people that have gathered around, he says, well, you don't see it because you're not part of the fold. You don't hear the voice. You don't understand. But then there's sometimes in my own life, I feel like sometimes I don't understand what God's trying to do. I don't clearly understand God's answer to my prayer. You know, life has been around long enough for me to realize that one of God's answers sometimes is not yet. Sometimes it's no matter how bad I want something. And sometimes it's yes, no matter how bad I don't want that to be the answer either. God moves us and shapes us and makes us pliable enough to respond and to hear and to follow after God. But we have to open ourselves up to it. That's one of the things that this passage can be used as kind of a discussion about predestination. Yes, we're predestined to be part of the elect. And no, we're not be a part of the elect. If we are a part of the elect, we're already in, so it's good. We're good. But it's also it's a story of human understanding. If we try to read the Scripture in totality, especially as a United Methodist, we understand that God's grace is available to all and is around even before we realize God's grace is in our lives and in our world. That it's God who invites us to follow after we open ourselves up. It's a two-way dialogue between us and God as we work through this power of salvation, this following after Christ in our lives and for our world. And that we respond not because of our own work, but because of God's gift to us, God's grace given to us freely, exemplified on the cross and proved by the resurrection. That life is eternal for us too because we are Christ's people. Only if you just show us who you are, we would understand, and especially us to read this text in light of Easter, we know who Christ is. For the resurrection is the fulfillment of all the promises that have been offered, that life eternal, and that Christ loves and forgives and enables us to be his people in the world, and that his Spirit is still with us each and every day. Each and every day. No time when God's Spirit is not with us. In this same passage where it talks about that there's some sheep that don't know his voice, there's also a part of it that says that the sheep will not be snatched from my hand. So the power of God to hold us close and keep us tight is even more powerful in this image for me. God is the one who provides the blanket of our love and grace and power to be pulled in as God's family. Nothing can separate us from that. Nothing, absolutely, positively nothing can separate us from that. This week has been one of a lot of news. Earthquakes, a little scary, you know. I have felt an earthquake. I felt it on this very block. First week I was here, I moved my desk in my office. Tom may know this, Bob may know this, but the phone jack was attached to the desk. And so if you pull the desk up, if you pick the desk up, if you move the desk, you will not believe what happened to that phone jack. It stayed on that desk and the wire stayed in the floor. Yep. I'm like, oh my Lord, what am I going to do? It's like my second week here. Like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't want to call the trustees, tell them I'm an idiot. I moved the desk, pulled the phone jack out of it, phone line, I can't do it. I don't think I've ever told y'all this story. Well, anyway, I'm like, I don't know nothing about phone jacks. Well, I said, well, I'm going to go to lunch and I'll figure something out. The good Lord's got to help me on this one. Came back, you won't believe it, even back then we had Google. I Googled that sucker. You know, there ain't but 4 wires in a phone jack. None of them carry much current at all, and you just got 4 screws to undo and put them back together. So I had my little pictures, printed out a color copy. Shh, don't tell. Put that sucker back together, and it's worked for 14 years. But that's not the part of the story I want you to know. The part of the story is that just after I came back from lunch and I figured this out and I got underneath my desk. Oh, this is funny. Anyway, I got underneath my desk and got my screwdriver out there and a little flashlight. You know how it is. I felt the earth move under my feet. And it wasn't but a couple minutes, my mom called me. She says, they said you can feel an earthquake in Greensboro. And I said, what are you talking about? She said there was an earthquake. That was when it was in Louisa, Virginia. Remember that one? It's been a while. And are you okay? And I says, well, I guess I am. I'm underneath the preacher's desk in the church office. But it was weird. But you know, the earth did move under my feet. But I didn't get too excited. I'm grateful it wasn't any more powerful than it was, because I know that's got to be fearful. I'm not downplaying an earthquake, trust me. No. But I am saying I didn't know enough to be scared, because I was already in my preacher's office under the desk. But there are times in our news cycle, in the world, that things really do shift under our feet. This week we've seen mayors and judges arrested in our country. I still don't understand all this. I don't understand enough to understand it, but I don't think that's normal. But I also saw a U.S. citizen become pope. I didn't think that was going to happen either. But I did notice that there's a dramatic difference between 2 world leaders now. Between we're going to run people off that aren't like us, and those who walk out on the balcony and the first words out of their mouth is, peace be with you. Whoa. Talk about a dichotomy. Just tell us plainly who you are. Peace be with you. Or just topsy-turvy all over the place. How is it that our lives, how is it that we hold fast to the promises of Christ? How is it that we hold fast to the message of Easter, the good news of Easter, the good news of life, even in a troubled world? And that we reach out in that love and that grace because of who we are. But not really because of who we are, but because of who Christ is in and through us. We are the hands and the feet of Christ that go out into the world. We're called to love our neighbors, to care for them, to reach out and love, to welcome the stranger, to care for those in need. That's part of this Easter message that runs in our lives and should be reflected in our world because of us and our presence in the world. All glory, honor, and power be to the one who was, who is, and who